Hey there, everybody. This is Eddie Babbage, founder, CEO of Timeline Genius, your host here of the Wedding Industry Insider podcast, back with another exciting episode. I am here with James Christianson and Otto Schulze, the duo behind the world renowned photography brand, two very talented artists. They have a vision of the truly exceptional, and they have a multi layered approach that combines editorial, documentary, and fine art styles. So, James and Otto, thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm really excited to dig into your story and to share some pearls of wisdom.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Eddie.
Yeah, I really
Absolutely.
appreciate being here. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah, so just to kind of give everybody a preview of why they definitely want to dig into this interview and stick around, we're going to be talking about three very important factors that can drive business success: building authentic relationships, having the ability to read people, and also building systems and strong SOPs, and also kind of layering in this idea of providing value, which kind of goes into relationships as we'll see, but providing value beyond what's expected. So before we get into the real juice here of the interview, Otto, I
Hmm.
guess I'll do this kind of in turn. Otto, would you mind just telling our audience a little bit more about your background and how you got to be where you currently are in the industry?
Yeah, so originally from South Africa, born and raised South African. Met a met a beautiful girl in Kathmandu, Nepal in 2001, and then just moved to America and married her. Had a bunch of kids, and here we are. Been living in Colorado, or used to live in Colorado for about 17 years, which is where I met James.
Mhm.
And currently live in Mexico. I've been for the past few years in a little village. But yeah, photography wise, my photography journey really started in Nepal. Documentary photography, kind of traveling village to village and just shooting people as they are. And then from there, I went back to South Africa and honestly never thought I'd get into weddings. Like back then, like wedding photography was the lowest on the totem pole. It was the worst of the worst, and so never really appealed to me. But then at some point, as a documentary photographer slash struggling artist, I thought, oh, let me give this a go and see for some extra income. And the approach I took with it was let me approach it like I'm shooting for an exhibition, fine art, crafted, non typical. And I really enjoyed it. And so when I moved to the US, it just kind of took off. The market is just so much bigger, so much more opportunity. And as that was happening, I kept running into this one person over and over, especially in Aspen and Telluride. Kept stealing my lunch essentially. This James Christianson guy. So I'm like, okay, well, we need to have a meeting of some sort here and figure this out. And so
An arm
yeah, we
wrestle
became
or
friends,
something.
and yeah, and it's like smart, right? I'm smart, and now we split the bank account. I'm like, go for it, take the lunch. Um, but yeah, what we did over the years was every year I would have one or two or three big events, and so would James. And when we'd have those, I would have him out, and he would have me out. And when we did that, the quality of the work, the flow, the experience for us and the clients was just elevated significantly. And I think what we did is we just did that one time too many, to where doing it alone was just undoable. And
Hmm.
so, what is it, James? 7 years ago, we said, look, instead of doing this two or three times a year, let's just go after the truly exceptional all the time. And
Mm.
so, being two boys, we made that decision, and the next week we were off and running. Long story short. And we started James and Schulze. It's been exceptional.
I love
That's
that.
a lot, James.
I love that. James, what about you? What's your story here for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, short and sweet. I failed to get into medical school. Ended up with a master's degree in epidemiology and biostatistics that, you know, I didn't use until the pandemic hit.
Mm.
Um, yeah, my route to photography was quite circuitous, right? From there I was like, I hate epidemiology. What am I going to do now? Ended up as a high school teacher at a private school where I ended up teaching photography, which is something I had been doing, half of my life as a hobby and just out of
Mm.
love for doing it. And while I was teaching this photography class, I had different photographers come in, newspaper photographers, commercial photographers, and one was a wedding photographer that came in, and she ended up becoming a mentor for me. I worked under her for 3 years during the summers when I was a teacher, and at some point I just kind of realized, hey, as a teacher, I could make more money doing pretty much anything other than teaching, and so the leap into
Yeah.
photography was an easy one for me. Um, and moved to Colorado, started my business, and yeah, that's where we kind of launched this whole thing, as Otto shared previously. I
Yeah.
have a beautiful wife, Charlene, 3 boys, and we live currently in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you both for the introductions. And what I loved, as we kind of discussed in the pre-interview, the goal here is always for people to leave with concrete, actionable things and
Mhm.
information, inspiration that they can apply
Yeah.
to their business, to level up. And when I was talking to both of you, obviously you've enjoyed success working together. Not that anything just is smooth sailing. I'm sure you have challenges just
Oh
like
yeah.
every other business, but you've also obviously, achieved a good measure of success and reputation in what you're doing. And when I asked both of you to tell me what you've done that's been, the number one factor in your success, what I heard unanimously was that building authentic relationships has been critically important. So, Otto,
Hmm.
tell me, first of all, what the notion of building authentic relationships means to you. Let's just kind of start with that.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think I tell my kids this, the biggest ROI for us in life is with other people. If you can connect with other people and figure that part of life out, you're set. And so in our business, when we started James and Schulze, one of the first kind of bottlenecks or ceilings that we hit was when we came to this point as photographers, we realized it's not just the work. We need
Mm.
to bring value to this audience beyond just photography in order to be appealing, right? And so this brought us to this point of starting to develop this skill of like really listening to people, right? So when we come into a relationship with a planner or a creative partner, we're not just there saying, oh, we're photographers. What we have to offer is photography. That's a given. We're really there listening and saying, but who are you? What do you need? What can we bring to this relationship? And so it's from that basis that we really, it's the heart and soul of our business. If we remove that from this, we'll be out of business next year. Easy. Um,
This is really fascinating to me. I just love being a student of success,
Mhm.
yeah,
in this industry and even beyond. And it's really an interesting principle, Otto. And to hear you say that this is something that you're instilling in your children, like I have 2 kids, and like
mm,
you want to just feed them as best you can, like give them the download on like these are the principles as
yeah,
best I can tell based on all of my years, decades. Gosh, I'm
yeah,
getting old
yeah,
at this point of life. Here's what I've got to give you to help you get through this world and be fulfilled and happy and successful. Very interesting that even instilling this in your children. I want to dig
yeah,
just a little deeper. And you're so right, Otto. I think it's easy. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. It's easy if you're a photographer or a wedding planner or a cake baker to get lost in just like the art of like the skill that you are like bringing to the market. But we all know in business, that's just one part of the equation. And I
yeah,
love the way you guys put it. Yeah, you got to do that, right? Like
yeah,
if
yeah.
you're not
It's a
doing
given.
great photography work, then like good luck with that, right? That's not going to
Yeah,
work.
yeah,
But that is like necessary, but not sufficient. So,
no,
Otto, tell me a little bit more. I want to just not to beat a dead horse here, but let's go
no.
even deeper. Like, how did you arrive at this notion that like relationships are the key? Like, what experiences kind of gave rise to that?
Ah. I mean, I think many, but one of the first things, it's a common one for photographers, is when we launched James and Schulze, we went to the market at a new valuation, a really high one. And for the most part, the market, new outreach said to us, no, you're crazy, that's too high. And so we did the typical photographer thing. We like looked at our work,
Mm,
look at the competition we are losing it against and going, but what's the problem? The work is good enough, right?
Mm.
And we'd improve the work, which we always do, but we'd still lose these battles over and over in the market, right? And so it was this first ceiling that we hit. We were like, okay, it's not the work. Then what is it?
Mm.
How do we become compelling here,
Mm.
And we started looking at this and going, okay, so we know what we want from this relationship or from this equation. I do photos. We want money for the photos, right? That's really important to us. But when you're reaching out to a planner, for example, photos is not the most important thing to them, right? For example, what's really important to them is the flow of their event or everything leading up to it. So the way we looked at it said, okay, we can bring value to them there, be easy collaborators, good to work with, fast response, read the timeline. Now in that relationship, we're bringing value beyond this photo. And the beauty of that is once you start doing that and you connect with somebody and they go, oh man, you see me, you value me, you've got my back, that informs how they experience the work, right? Because if you're doing really good work and somebody's like, man, I love those guys, that's gonna inform the experience of the work, right? And so that was it was hitting a ceiling that really brought us to this for the first time,
I
honestly.
love that so much,
Yeah,
Otto. And I know what you're saying is not just about photography. I want to say that because we've got a lot of wedding planners listening right now. We have DJs, venue, like
yeah,
these are principles that transcend any particular discipline or line of work.
yeah.
James, I'm going to put you on the hot seat here a little bit too. I want you to let me hear from you. Like, first of all, your perspective, because you were the first one to kind of mention when I asked, like
Mm.
relationships, Eddie. Like relationships are the thing. Tell me why for you that's had such a central importance in your business.
Yeah, again, I guess I stumble on to through trial and error and making tons of mistakes. This is how I tend to learn. So I spent when I moved to Colorado with my wife, I spent the first 3 years of my professional photography career, trying to place ads in the magazines and trying to, like, how can I get hired? And at some point, about 3 years in, I just had this crazy idea. I was like, I'm just going to start meeting with people. Like, I'm a people person. Like, I love people. I'm just going to start meeting with people. My goal was to meet with 52 people in 1 year. I'm going to meet every week. I'm going to meet a new person. And I did that faithfully for a year. I met 52 people, and they were other photographers. They were some wedding planners. They were, like you're saying, cake makers and florists and venue operators, and anyone that would meet with me, I met with. And again, this was my third year in business. And my business had been pretty much, flatlined. And about the 6 to 8 month of meeting people, so the 38th person that I met, my business started to do this, like just this uptick, and it literally just took off. And again, I just had stumbled into
So you
this.
started
And I'm
taking my
not saying,
lunch.
yeah, and I'm not saying this was because of my ability with people necessarily, but I think it was literally just the connections I was making, and my name was getting around because I would sit with somebody who made a cake for the planner that I met with 5 weeks ago, and then they're talking. Your name is just coming up, um, and you're providing value as we've talked about. And that was back when I was charging, I know, $2,000 for a wedding, right?
Mm.
And now we look at our weddings in the luxury space, where collaboration is probably, I shouldn't say probably, is way more valuable and important, because you spend, a planner and designer spend a year or more, 18 months sometimes, producing and
Yeah,
designing and building out huge structures and spending millions of dollars towards one weekend. And they've brought a team of, sometimes 200 people together to
yeah,
execute this vision. And collaboration without relationship is
yeah. You're
impossible.
dead out of the gate. Yeah,
Yeah, so having those real relationships and authentic relationships only make that collaboration better.
yeah,
Super cool, James. And you're a step ahead of me because as I said at the outset of the interview, I want to leave people with something concrete that they can potentially, like, in my view, and you guys know you're in business, like sometimes you hear like one idea that just unlocks
Oh yeah,
value. And I don't want to just gloss over what you just said because that was super hella concrete. Like you had a goal
super Ella, I like that.
to 52, meet 52 new people in a year. Do you think that's something that other people listening could kind of do? And maybe it's not 52 for them. Maybe it's 50, maybe it's 26 or whatever. Like,
No,
Or maybe
or do
it's
you think that,
150.
or maybe, yeah, like, or do you think there's something more particular to your personality that made that work for you? Do you think that's something that other people could like apply that would really help them as well?
Yeah, 100%. I think the mindset that you take, as we've talked about this value, right? So many people, and whether that's a DJ or a florist or a photographer or a videographer, go to other creative partners with this mindset of like, what can you give me?
yeah,
I'm here knocking on the door. What can you give me? And they go to multiple people that way, and they're like, nobody wants to meet with me. We hear this
yeah,
all the time. Nobody wants to meet with me. And it's always in the approach of like, how do I reach out, and what is my goal? Our authentic goal when we're trying to build a relationship and especially meet somebody for the first time is, how can we help you? Otto touched on it before. Like,
yeah,
what can we do for you?
yeah,
And when we take that mindset into reaching out to people, I think that's why the doors are open
yeah, yeah.
to us, is because that we try to clearly communicate that. What can we do for you? How can we help you reach your goals? I know we're just the lowly photographer on this, in this huge collaboration that's happening. But man, if that means picking up chairs in the middle of the reception because like we have to clear the floor quickly for whatever reason,
Yeah.
like, and everything in between, right? Like we're just looking to how can we help?
Yeah,
Um,
and that aside, James, it makes the experience of working together so much easier and more enjoyable as well. It
mm,
makes the work better. And it takes the pressure off really because now I used to be so anxious going into sales calls, like cold outreach, intimidated the hell out of me. And I'd sit on those calls terrified because I felt like I had to do a pitch, a song and dance. I didn't have one. And when we switched this to just taking interest, the pressure just rolled off because I can listen. And
mm.
so now I'm just asking another person, tell me about you, and just listening. The pressure is off. And people love sharing, they have needs, and you just listen. And you develop this skill over time of like learning how to, you know, move that around for sure. But yeah, this is absolutely a learned skill. There's no question about that. Anybody can do it. And it's funny, the 52 people a year, we laugh at that now, like only 52, because
Yeah.
we'll do more than that in a month now, um, because with business, it's ROI, and there's no bigger ROI than this. Not in our industry. Our industry is so personal, it's so filled with emotion and feeling. Connecting is the biggest mover,
Yeah.
without a
And it's
doubt.
interesting, Eddie, really quick, just listening to Otto talk. We experienced this, I told the story of 52 when I was struggling with business. Uh, when the pandemic hit, Otto and I had already been in business for what, 3 or 4 years,
Yeah,
and it was going well at that point. But when the pandemic hit, we turned to each other and said, "What can we do during this time?" And we doubled down on, let's build relationships. And we
yeah,
spent most of the pandemic on Zoom calls like this with people. Just, that's what we did the whole time as a business. We weren't working, right? Nobody was working, so we were talking to people.
yeah.
And again, we saw this huge uptick in the success of our business just
It
by,
doubled. Yeah, it
yeah,
doubled. Yeah,
yeah.
Guys, like I love doing this podcast for exactly the reason of conversations like this. I
yeah,
mean, there's so many thoughts I have. I Tony Robbins had a quote that just got lodged in my head. He said, "Business is a spiritual game."
Mm,
And, without waxing overly like philosophical or religious or whatever, because everybody has their own unique views on that stuff. I will say, as a serial entrepreneur myself, having started 3 companies, what I'm hearing from you guys is something that I've seen personally and
mm,
heard from other successful people. And it's a beautiful thing. It is transcending the personal self and focusing on others.
Yeah, totally.
Finding out how to serve. And you hear about
Yeah.
books like How to Win Friends and Influence People. Like it's right, like what you got.
It's
It's That's it. It's
that's
like
it.
it's paradoxical because it's by forgetting about yourself and really dialing into others that your own success like is
It's
is born. But damn, that's powerful, man. Like
yeah.
I love this so much.
And
Uh,
Eddie, and especially for photographers, because we were guilty of this, the egotistical photographer. The story always started with us. A client would reach out, we go into a call, and you launch into, I
yeah.
got my first camera when I was 12, and I loved blah blah blah. And so at some point we switched and we said, it's not about us at all. It's
Mm,
about the client, it's about the planner, it's about the
mm.
partner, it's about somebody else. And when we made that switch, our business doubled, and the next year it doubled again. And it just keeps going because that's where the growth is. It's in people. It really is. And I think nowadays, especially with all the technology
Hmm.
that's filling so many of the other gaps, like camera gear has gotten so good. When we started, we're old. When we started, it was really hard to make a technically good image, right? Really hard. So there was a skill in that, and there was reward for that skill. But nowadays, that's not really a skill anymore because the gear is so good. You can lay an egg and save yourself. The gear is that good. So what are you left with now? What's the real value again now? It's connecting with people. We're back there. That's the value. That's where you go beyond. And photographers, especially, we're always stuck there. They always want to rebrand and re-edit and reshoot. And we're like, that's good. We love the art of it. We work really hard at our craft. But like you said, Eddie, we can't say this loud enough. If you want to grow as a business and as a person, to your point, this is where it's at.
Hmm.
Nowhere else. This is the spot. It's that simple.
And
Yeah,
you know what the
it's
really
so
interesting thing about this whole idea of collaboration is that
Yeah.
the work, in wedding photography, because it can be formulaic, right? There's similar moments, there's similar timelines, there's similar everything. It can start feeling formulaic, but when we decided, hey, we're going to make other people the focus, their
Yeah.
vision and collaboration the focus, our work totally changed
Yeah.
because every wedding we come at it like it's a totally different assignment because it is like somebody wants more of a fashion and more emphasis on or dramatic moments, or maybe it's more of an emphasis on just the venue and the experience of being there. We're telling a different story every single time, which has just been a real pleasure
Yeah. Yeah.
to
It's true.
get outside of ourselves and go, oh, this is the way I shoot it. No, like, how do you see it? Tell us. It's been fun.
Yeah.
That's awesome, guys. Yeah, there's a guy named MJ DeMarco. He wrote a book called The Millionaire Fastlane, and it's really interesting. He's like, success is the echo effect of helping others, like, and you
Mhm.
can only do that when you're dialing into others. Like, there's just some way in which there's like this like cosmic wind that just blows your sail and ship forward, and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can't fake it, right? I think a lot of
Yeah.
No.
people they try to pretend like, oh, but it's really just clearly a Trojan horse to get their stuff in there,
No.
and it's like, no, but like when you're,
Yeah.
like you said, just like genuinely dialed into the, and other people can feel that, like all sorts of magic happens. I want to get
Yeah.
into the operationalizing of this, okay? I have a number of questions. I think people hearing this hopefully this will resonate everything we're saying. Okay, wait, let me put my selfishness and fears and ambitions aside and really dial into serving others in every way, shape, and form that I can. Okay, I
Mm.
get that. All right, how do I operationalize this, right? You said something, James, it was interesting. During the pandemic, you're doing this over Zoom. Can
Mm.
Zoom be leveraged now to, because I know for me, and I
Mm.
bet this applies to other people as well. I've got two kids. I live in Brooklyn. For me to get out, there's I mean, it might take me an hour to get somewhere and an hour to
Mm.
get home. I'm like, man, that's valuable work time. Is there a way to leverage Zoom to build these relationships that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like I said, I live in this little lake resort town in the middle of Idaho, way north, almost in Canada. Otto's in a small fishing village in Mexico. Like most of our creative partners are nowhere near where we work. So
Yeah.
Zoom is the thing, is the tool we use.
Yeah. And
almost
it's,
exclusively to connect with people. And when we
it's a,
started, we flew
yeah,
all over the country, honestly.
Brilliant.
Like we would go to Dallas, we went to New York, we would go to LA, and we would try to have like schedule. We'd go for 3 or 4 days, and we would try to schedule as many meetings as we could, which was great. And I mean, in person is always ideal if you can do it. But yeah, it's
yeah,
difficult to do that, and you can be face to face with Zoom. So
yeah. And honestly, I would even say that I'd push back against that a little bit about the in-person thing. Zoom beats that at volume, right?
Right.
Because
The cost
for me
benefit
to,
analysis. Yeah.
yeah, for me to get to New York now, and for you to get to New York, it's like a 3-day trip for us to have
Right.
1 day of meetings where we can stay home and connect with all of those people on Zoom, save their time, get far bigger ROI. No, Zoom is incredible. Like with client calls, for me and James, we can sit on the call. There's a planner, there's a client, bride and groom, maybe a mom on, and we can just watch people while James is talking. I can watch mom's reactions to it. And when I feel something from mom, I can speak to mom. Oh, mom, we've got you covered on family photos. And so you
Brilliant.
can immediately just, it's incredible, really. It really is an incredible tool.
and to speak to the authenticity part of building relationships, Zoom, I mean, for many of our calls, because you're dealing with people and meeting them in their homes, like there's all sorts of stuff going on, right? Oh, my kids just popped in, like came in the window, in the door, and like the dog's barking, and there's just a layer of like realness that
That's right.
when you're having a professional meeting, you don't get, right? All of our meetings are professional meetings, but
Yeah.
people are drinking coffee,
Yeah.
their husband's walking through the back of the the screen and doing a little wave, and it works.
Then use all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a wedding planner, you know how important it is to create detailed wedding day timelines for your events. But creating your timelines can be a tedious and time-consuming job. Until now. Because Timeline Genius lets you create beautiful, detailed wedding day timelines with ease. And it keeps everything you need on the wedding day in one central place. Here's how it works. First, Timeline Genius saves all your clients, vendors, and venues in your Rolodex, so you don't lose time looking for their information. And when you're ready to create a new timeline, you simply enter the key information for your wedding. Click a button, and voila! Timeline Genius magically gives you a customized timeline for your event, where all the details are laid out and the times are calculated for you. From there, you can easily edit your timeline by adding or deleting items, inserting images, changing font styles, and customizing everything to your liking. You can also instantly shift the times for as many items as you want. And when it comes to your clients and vendors, Timeline Genius lets you give them the highest level of service. You can send them tailored timelines, showing only the items they're involved in. And you can collaborate by inviting them to a mobile-friendly, web-based version of the timeline. You can even set text message reminders to automatically go out on the wedding day. And once you've completed your perfect timeline, you can download it or email it out as a beautifully styled PDF. And that's Timeline Genius, a smart software that will help take your wedding planning to the next level. Start your free trial today.
It really is amazing. I was reading a book with my 5-year-old, like about Abraham Lincoln, and it was talking about how he got updates on the Civil War via telegraph. And that
Mm.
was mind-blowing stuff, right? At the time, like, mid-19th century, like, wait a minute, I can be like hundreds of miles away and
Mhm.
but like what we're doing now is bananas, right? Like if
Yeah.
you go back to the 1700s and show somebody how he's going to be
Wow.
talking like real time over, I mean, it's bananas. And it is like, so how do you tee up, either of you who wants to answer this? I get how Zoom can be this powerful medium and tool, but how do you get the Zoom meeting set up? Are you just emailing people out of the blue? I'd love to have a coffee date or a virtual coffee date with you. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, but eventually that's the simplicity of what you have to do. If you've never met somebody, you've never worked with them, at some point, you're going to
Yeah,
have to hit them cold. Now that people don't like cold outreach for many reasons, especially in the States, guy from the Firemen's Association's calling you and your car insurance policy. So we have this aversion to it. I see that call, I'm like, I don't want to talk to you.
Warranty on my car that I don't own.
Yeah. Your BMW warranty is expired. It's like, yes, I sold it 12 years ago. um, but I mean, I think there's ways to do it, right? And we talk about like layering things on over time.
Yeah.
Brand association. Our industry, again, I think is so ideal for this because it's visual. It is community based. Everybody is on Instagram already kind of gathering around that watering hole. So you can leverage that, right? You can use that to kind of slowly over a period of time, strategically, introducing yourself or your brand to a new, say, let's say a planner or a creative partner. So by the time you hit them with that message saying, I love what you do, would love to connect, it's not completely cold, right? But to people listening, at some point, you're going to have to just hit somebody that's never heard of you. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah.
But I think the big thing there is to be strategic about it and to be patient, because when we reach out to somebody for the first time, we have no expectations that we're going to write them and they're going to go, you guys are amazing, here's a booking. Our expectation is, and we talk about this a lot, is it's really going to take us 7 or 8 touches. So a 1 to 3 year period before we convert for the first time, whether that's an inquiry or a booking.
Yeah.
And then once that happens, now you've begun this relationship.
Wow.
So we do this with lots of people over and over many years. And then eventually that compounds into success, right?
Yeah. Brilliant.
But yeah.
I love it. And James, like, what's your sort of take as well on this notion of like, are you guys, what's your strategy for like who you're, deciding to reach out to?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's the more you do, this is like a giant snowball, right? That starts, just in your hands and ends up the size of a house. Because building relationships, especially when they're authentic, is opportunity giving, right? Opportunities fling off of every relationship that you build.
Yeah.
So yes, there is lots of cold outreach. There is lots of persistence. But at some point, and we felt this at some point, as I was saying before, like I meet with such and such a person who just had a call with another person. They happen to mention your name right at the same time. You're just hitting them with an email or a direct message, like,
Right.
oh, that name seems familiar. Jenny, isn't that the person that you just said you met with? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, and it becomes easier and easier and easier because you get a reputation for adding value,
Yeah.
right? And so that's the and you have to also go into this idea with like everybody has a gatekeeper, right? Like people cannot respond to every photographer, videographer, planner, DJ, band that writes them. They just can't.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we are persistent. We're oftentimes bold and we're persistent, and we kindly just keep coming back and keep knocking at the door.
Yeah.
Like, and we do it strategically. You talked about strategy. Yes, we absolutely do this strategically. Like there's no way, we know Colorado well. There's no way we're writing a wedding planner in Colorado in September. It's the busiest time of the year. Or anywhere around that, any 3, 4, 5 months around that. We know that slow time starts in November, right, through April. If we're going to ask them for a call, we're going to wait until they have some slow time.
Yeah.
And that goes with no matter where that person is, we're looking, what is their likely busy time? And we're not trying to reach them then. It's annoying, right? And it's tone deaf, really. Again, to this idea of providing value. Like you reach somebody, hey, I'd love to have coffee with you. Can we do it next week? And it's their busiest time of the year. They're like, what, are you kidding? You didn't even take the time to know like what I do and when I'm going to be busy. Like that's signal number one, that this is about you and not about me. So we're really careful about that type of thing.
Yeah, and what's really important to point out about this, I listen to you, James, most of this is happening subconsciously with people. They're not sitting there going, oh man, they're doing this now. This is the second time they've written me. But we know the data on this. We know this is happening. And so at some point, if you do this right, they green light you. Like James says, the gatekeeper goes away. And now your message comes through a little bit more clearer, right? And now you can, anyway, you can bring much more value. You just can.
Well, and to just add, sorry, Eddie, to keep jumping back and ping-ponging back and forth with Otto, but if you look at sales data, right, and this is just across all of sales, we love to talk about this statistic that says 80% of any sales, and so if we're talking about getting a call as being the sale being made here, to start building that authentic relationship, 80% of sales happen on the 8th touch point.
Yeah, it's a huge statistic.
80%.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah, and so most people are going to stop after 1, maybe 2, definitely after 3.
Yeah.
But the reality is you need 8 touch points. So we always have this kind of counter in our head, like, oh, I hit him with a comment on Instagram. That might be the first one, like a really kind. I mean, sometimes we'll just drop into someone's Instagram and go, "Hey, amazing work, bravo," and we leave. Like that's it. Like just an honest compliment.
You mean it?
It's beautiful. Yeah. Mind blown. Like the vibe. It's whatever that might be. The symmetry. That's another touch point. And then maybe at some point you ask for a call, and you might have to ask for that call multiple times because timing's not right.
No,
so that's kind of how we look at it from a strategy standpoint, which always feels weird. Like you're like, are you manipulating people? Well, no, it's kind of human nature and trying to understand human nature and what we need as people. Because I do the same thing. I have a strong gatekeeping, right? People write us are like, not right now. And they usually just go away. But it's the ones who keep coming back that are ambitious that you go, let's honor this. Like there's something here.
Totally.
That is super cool, guys. And I just to kind of put a fine point on this, and we could talk certainly more because this is so important, but just the really concrete, powerful potential idea that people can take away here, I think, is in your business, getting systematic and intentional about getting out and building those authentic relationships, identifying the people, maybe starting in your local market, like getting on Zooms. I just love this as a clear and concrete takeaway. In the interest of time here, there are a couple of other really important points that I want to hit on. One, they're all three actually very linked together in my mind. But the next one is providing value beyond what's expected. Okay, we've already kind of started getting into this and talking about reaching out to people, providing value, not just focused on what you want. But Otto, will you talk to me as just kind of a natural segue here? We're still talking about relationships in a sense, but like talk to me more specifically and pointedly about providing value beyond what's expected.
Yeah, I'll start with an example that's never left me. So the first time we stayed at an Amman property, I don't know if you know the Amman property, it's just incredible, right?
Okay.
We'd stayed at the Four Seasons and all kinds of properties, but never at an Amman. So we arrived at this property, we're expecting to be blown away. Amazing location, beautiful everything, food, name it. But when we arrived, the entire staff, from gardening to top management, everybody was there to greet us. And I remember the impact that this had on me as such an example of like I said, good beds, nice pool, good chef. That's a given at 5-star level. But what they did with that, they just went 1% beyond that. And it's never left me. And I'm like, that's luxury. And so we brought that idea into our relationships with partners and going, okay, so with a wedding planner, for example, if I reach out, if I work with them, what's important to us is photos because we're photographers. But that's not the most important thing to them, right? Most important thing to them is this event, this orchestration of like a year plus and the weekend and all the events, that going smoothly. And so the way we look at that is saying, okay, so let us be easy collaborators then for them, easy to work with, fast response. We read the timeline. On the day, we're looking out for their interests, right? We see something, we go, hey, note, mom is a little anxious or whatever. Now we're bringing, yes, small 1% movers at a time, but we're bringing value beyond the assumed thing, which is great photography, which we bring with all of our heart and all of our soul. But it does so much, right? Like we've elevated above our competition in the mind of that planner now. Like we get this feedback so often. Like this is so simple. You guys are so easy to work with. Like when you guys are there, we just relax. We know it's taken care of. You read the timeline, which is such a simple thing. You respond.
Yeah.
And these are ways you can bring value, small, easy ways, low-hanging fruit immediately. And again, like I said earlier, then that informs their experience of the work. It's all elevated. The way they speak to the client about you. Like we get to our clients and our clients just trust us implicitly because the planners, because we've proven that to them, that's how they set the scene. It's like, oh man, these guys are covered. And then they act accordingly. And so it's win-win.
I love that. And James, I really, really love that, Otto. Like, James, what's your take on this notion of, because I know for you, this was also a very important factor in your guys' success. What's your take on providing value beyond the expectation?
Yeah, I mean, as like Otto was saying, as photographers, we often come to a planner, and especially at the luxury or premium level, with the idea of like, I can give you great photos. Well, there's 1,000 photographers that can give you great photos. Like there's talent
Yeah.
everywhere you look, incredibly talented photographers. So, and that's the given, right? If you're gonna photograph $1 million wedding, you better be able to bring it, right? Like, so there's not really a differentiator there to come to and say, hey, I provide great photos. Well, why does that make you any different than X, Y, and Z? So we kind of hit this brick wall at some point, in James and Schulze, scratching our head. Okay, let's dig into this idea. And what we realized was every business owner, because these are business relationships, right? We're going to become like actual friends with some people. Yeah. But for the most part, we all have our friends from at home that we live near and we go to and have a beer with. And these are business relationships. What do those businesses need? Why do you have a business? So I like to think of value that we can bring in a couple categories. Can I bring them more revenue in some way? Yeah. Can I bring them more influence or exposure? Or can I bring them more opportunity? So we in all of our outreach and all of our relationship building, we're always on the lookout for connecting people with one of those things. Can I provide you more exposure? Can I provide you more revenue? Can I provide you more opportunity? And that looks like a lot of different things, right? Depending on the planner or the creative partner and what their goals are, where they are at. And that's what Otto was talking about earlier, of really listening. Tell me about you. Like, what are you excited about this year? What are your goals? Like, oh man, maybe we're a planner in New York and we're like, we really want to make a big push into Mexico. Well, what connections and relationships do we have in Mexico at properties or other photographers or other wedding planners that we can maybe even make a connection with, or bring them an actual wedding, or get them on a fam trip? I mean, there's all sorts of ways that we can look at that. But that's what we see as our job. Let's go figure out what they want. Yeah. And then go figure out how to help them get that thing.
And James, sorry, as I listen to you now, I hear that, I can see it. You're increasing your value. Like, it's that simple. Like, everybody wants to charge more money for the photos. I'm like, but you can increase your value this way. This is the key to that, because I listen to you talk like now, I'm like, yeah, you're increasing your value. You're becoming more valuable to them, legitimately.
Yeah, and it all really ties together, because your ability to provide this additional value goes right back to what we were talking about in building the authentic relationships, dialing into what the other person needs, right? Not just kind of hitting them with what you want and need. I may come back, if time permits, I may come back to this principle of providing value. But as we kind of discussed in the pre-interview, I think it almost kind of blends into the authentic relationships. The last piece of this that I feel like I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't talk about with you all is something that kind of came up toward the end of the pre-interview chat that we were having. And I feel like there's a very key relationship here between SOPs, which you guys started talking about, like building out the systems for your business, and everything else that we've talked about. Why? Because if you're mired down in the execution of working in your business, editing photos if you're a photographer, as we talked about, doing your timelines if you're a wedding planner, whatever, then you're not going to have as much time to do these higher ROI activities like building relationships. You both come from the school of hard knocks like me. It sounds like you've done things right, you've done things wrong, and you've found your way to a point in your business where you have solid SOPs. So I guess, Otto, let me just kind of put you on the spot here first, okay? Talk to me about the role that SOPs play in your business, how you guys kind of reached this point where you're like, okay, we got to have better SOPs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I said earlier in the pre-interview, we just asked this question in our educational community too, which is like several thousand photographers and videographers. And we said, how are you spending most of your time? And the number one answer by far was editing. Right. And that was so telling, right? Because my first reaction was like, that's the worst way to be spending the most of your time, because you've already been paid for that. Like, that doesn't make you more money. But it's because people don't have effective systems in place. Like, I know that place. Like, for years, it took me 6 to 8 weeks to finish an edit of grinding because of inefficiencies. But because we have SOPs in place for this now, and the technology is a lot better, and we're utilizing that, it's freed us up. We spend a week now getting the edit done, right? We have systems in place for it. And so what that does is it allows me and James to reach out, connect, listen, think bigger picture, think creatively, right? Because we have the headspace for it. We've cleared that space. I can think creatively, because the first thing that goes when you're overwhelmed and run down is creativity. That thing gets shut down. It's like your phone goes to black and white mode and it just goes, can't do it, right? And I used to think of business, I felt like an artist that's creative that had to run a business to make a living. And it was just like a disconnect. And in this partnership with James, the business part has become, honestly, it's far more creative than taking photos, actually. It's incredibly creative.
Wow.
But if we didn't have these systems in place, no, we would still be stuck, But these systems really free you up. I think that's the biggest thing. They free you up to do, and you said it, Eddie, like ROI. That's always the question. If I do this, what do I get in return? I can spend weeks crafting an image, but what's the ROI for me? Will my client even appreciate that nuance? Probably not. So you have to find a middle ground and say, okay, there it is. And now I'm going to go do this, or family, or like we talk about why we do this. And that's for us, it's our families, right? 7 kids between the two of us. So if there's no time left at the end for me with my kids, and for James with his kids, then we go, what's the point of this then, right? So SOPs serve that as well,
I love that. James, just to kind of have you extend on, build on what he's saying there in terms of just the implementation, like the practical side of this. How did you all go about crafting these SOPs? Were there like books that you read, or is this just like, no, this is intuitive. Let's just spend some time and creative energy, like thinking about how to be more efficient. Like what's the sort of how here on doing your SOPs?
Yeah, I'd love to say that like we're really smart and knew like we needed these things right out of the gate, but it was really, obviously we were in business separately for 10, 12 years and never really had this, but I think it was the coming together that forced us to, because we were doing different things different ways. So we'd be like, okay, well, what is the look of the photos going to be? Like he had a certain look, I had another look. Well, we got to decide together what is that going to look like. So that was kind of the beginning, and then we was like, oh, we got an inquiry, and we would both respond to it. Like, what? Oh, like we can't both be writing the same person. We'd look like idiots. Like, and we would sit down and we'd build. Okay, how do we want to respond? Who's going to respond when? And we would build an SOP. We didn't even know it was called an SOP until recently, maybe a year and a half ago. we we were just
Yeah.
building systems. Like I've always kind of been a systems guy. I like systems, but I didn't realize that I was creating standard operating procedures, right? I just kind of
Yeah.
was doing it, and so we would sit down and layer upon layer upon layer, like we were saying, an inquiry would come in. Well, how are we going to write that? And then a year later, or how are we going to respond to that? And then a year later, it's, well, wait a minute. What's the voice? What's the tone that we want to respond to this? And what information do we actually want to include in that email?
And why?
And
Yeah.
this is just a small example. And since, over the years, we have put SOPs in place across pretty much every aspect of our business, from when and how a lead comes in. Like we try to respond within the first 5 minutes. That's our SOP. 5 minutes and no more than 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
That's just the response time. To what do our proposals look and how do those get built? And what systems do we use for that? And how do we respond and when do we take payment? And
Yeah. Yeah.
to bookkeeping, for years I tried to do my own booking. I was like, oh, I'm fairly smart. I can figure this out. And I could, if I ever could figure out to have the time to go and sit down and do it. And tax season would come and I'd be like, oh crap. I haven't done my
Yeah.
books for 9 months. Right. So building a
Yeah. The
system and
IRS
actually
shows up at your house.
hiring
They go.
somebody
Yeah.
to do that for
Yeah.
us. And on and on and on throughout the entire, and now we see even more the value and continue to just add layer upon layer of SOPs so
Yeah.
that like once it's on paper and once we've had that discussion, we don't have to think about it anymore. Right. Which just frees us up to actually do our job,
Yeah.
which is building relationships. That's Otto and I say it all the time. Our job is building relationships, and we get to take photos at the end of our job. Like that's the cherry on top for us.
That's the easy part, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the easiest thing. Yeah.
Wow, guys, this is really powerful. I feel like we've given this like these three sort of legs of a stool for success, right? And everybody's going to come at this
Mm.
their own way, but what a really cool bundle or like triad of like success principles here. This notion
Yeah.
of like building authentic relationships,
Yeah.
providing value beyond expectations, and having your SOPs in place such that you're able to go out and do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to put each of you, I knew, we said this in the pre-interview, I knew the time would fly because I knew this was going to be a great chat. And there's three of us, so there's so much to pack in. I'm going to have to get you guys back on the show at some point to do round two of
Please.
this. But what I want to do here to kind of round things out is for each of you, and Otto, I'll start with you. If you could give one piece of advice, okay, based on all of your personal and professional experience, values, like everything you've seen, if you could give one piece of advice to our listeners that would help them as much as possible in building their businesses, what would you say to people?
Yes, man, at the risk of sounding like a stuck record, like you're gonna have to get better at connecting with people. I'll just
Yeah,
say that because that's a given. But the
yeah,
other thing that I'm thinking throughout this podcast is, and talking at this audience is going, you have to be patient. You you have to develop some tenacity here, like because for me and James, like we said, our families for us is the game. This is why we do it. And so you talked about a snowball developing. Well, for many years, we were just literally, we talked about this. We're pushing this thing up a hill, right? And that first year or two, like I had to take a job at UPS at night, and James was plowing snow, like to keep pushing this thing up. But eventually it cleared the hill and now you're growing, right?
Hmm.
You have to develop that grit where you say, because people would say no to us often, especially in the beginning. And to a man, we've worked with those people now since because we just said, okay, but we'll be back. And if you go back and you look at other success stories, one of my favorite books, photo books of all time, is William Klein, The Americans. And I remember reading his story about it's an all-time great book. He was rejected more than 50 times by the biggest publications in New York, like just saying, this is garbage, this is crazy. And if he had not had that tenacity of going, I'll keep coming, And just look at Elon Musk, look at anybody like that. You look at the billionaire now and you go, but I'm like, man, that's a long journey of no's and failing and trying and implementing and failing and failing and failing. There's no shortcuts. I would just say, be patient, buckle up. It is a journey. To get to the top of anything is a journey. Otherwise, you're aiming too low.
I love
It's
that
like
so much.
nine things.
This is so cool. Like, it's funny. It's like sometimes I think people can hear some of these things, but like, oh, I've heard that. Yeah, because these are the fundamentals. They're not
Oh, yeah.
new. They don't change. You hear them with different color and hues and, filtered through a different personality and experience and context. But yeah, these are the pillars, like tenacity.
That's
Boy,
it.
I love that one. I love that. James, what's your, similar, same question for you. If you could give one piece of advice to people to help them as much as possible building their businesses, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to piggyback off of what Otto was saying, like that grit, that tenacity is so important. But what might be even more important in order to have that tenacity, to have that continued persistence, is you actually have to enjoy your business.
Yeah, man.
I mean, you were saying before, Otto, like the business has become so creative and enjoyable. And to come full circle with this, I mean, if you want to do one thing, take a month and sit down and systemize your business. And why do I connect those two things? Because it's those things that are constantly in the back of your head that need to get done that aren't getting done, that weigh you down, and they just keep piling up, right? And at some point you're just like, oh my gosh, it's stressful, it's not fun, it's not creative, I can't think. Take the time, clear your plate, write people, put an autoresponder on, whatever you have to do to create the time to sit down and systemize, build strong SOPs so that, like you were saying, you can work in, what is the term, on your business instead of in your
Yeah,
business.
yeah,
Because you'll never have
So
that
good.
joy and that creativity without having the clarity in your head. And it's
Yeah.
the systems and the SOPs that will bring that for you.
Yeah.
yeah. I love that. What a great place to leave it to, guys, because that kind of brings it full circle right back to what we talked about, having those SOPs to let you do those other two things that we
Yeah.
discussed. If folks want to get in touch with you guys, social media, etc., like how should people reach out to you?
Auto, go.
I was just waiting for you because you're usually so good at this. Yeah, we have an online community, a Facebook group, the Business of Luxury Weddings, and an educational brand where we've started this amazing community. We have this conversation ongoing, daily, nonstop. And we just learn together and we grow together and we hit those ceilings. And it's a big group. It's photographers, videographers, planners, musicians, the whole thing. So that's one place, sagejourney.co, or the Facebook group, the Business of Luxury Weddings. Just put it in there and it'll pop up and we'll happily let you in. And then on Instagram, James and Schulze, that's our photography brand, as well as Sage Journey on Instagram as well. What did I miss, Jimmy?
No, that's it. We actually teach these things. We do have an educational course that called the Business of Luxury Weddings that people can buy into that program, and we have a mentorship program as well. So just our goal again is to help.
Yeah,
And we've
truly.
come up through the school of hard knocks and made so many mistakes trying to figure this out. And we were like, you know what? Let's streamline this for people. Let's see if we can put a guide together that will be helpful to people to come and have similar successes as we have had. So
Yeah,
that's kind of what that educational brand is about.
and we're an open book on in that course and in that community. We share all of it, all of our systems, everything that got us here, that we did to get here, that we're doing today to stay here and continue to grow,
Mm.
all of it. And we're like, here's the information, here's our SOPs, here's our systems. Bring it.
Does the course apply? Is it primarily for photographers? Does it apply to other wedding industry pros as well?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
I mean,
have
obviously we're
actually.
fit. Go ahead, James.
I was gonna say, we're obviously photographers. We built the course around photographers and videographers. But having said that, we have musicians, we have wedding painters, we have planners, we have I don't know if we have any florists or designers yet, but there's quite a mixed bag of people who have gone through the course and have found benefit. So
Yeah. Yeah, because you talked about this earlier, Eddie, like a small mind shift change can have such a big impact in your business. And for us, with the luxury space, there was a few things, a few moments, a few realizations that shifted our business entirely. The buying psychology of the luxury buyer versus an average Joe like us, night and day apart. So your sales approach needs to shift. So all of those kind of things are relevant to anybody, moving into the luxury space. Because the bottom line is, if you're working in the luxury space like we are, planner, florist, we're not our clients. If I was a billionaire, I would, I love doing this, but I wouldn't be doing this. I'd be doing something else. So we're not our clients, right? So their buying psychology, that's a big aha moment for most people, whether you're a florist or a designer or a photographer. So yes, it can serve everybody, no doubt.
Well, I think anybody listening to us right now, you guys have certainly built that know, like, trust factor by yourselves being very open and authentic. And I love these interviews because, like,
Gosh.
I can feel myself getting like jazzed up and just being reminded of some of these core, deep sort of principles for success. So I'm sure everybody else has been inspired and informed and made better by you guys. So thank you both for taking time to do this interview. Really, this was a blast.
Yeah, we'll do it again, please, if you'll have us.
yeah, thank you, Eddie.
Awesome.
Enjoyed it very much.